Commander Vex 9 stared at the transmission screen with all four of his eyes, each one registering a different level of disbelief. The humans had actually responded to their request. After 3 solar cycles of waiting, after broadcasting their desperate plea across 17 star systems, Earth had finally answered. Sir? Lieutenant Cora's voice cracked like old leather. The human representative is requesting clearance to dock. One ship? Vex 9's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement if the situation wasn't so dire. They sent one ship to help us fight the Ravager Fleet? Apparently so, sir. And get this, Cora's tentacles wiggled with nervous energy, they're claiming to have sent their weakest soldier. A pause. A very long pause. Their weakest? That's what the transmission says, Commander. Quote, as requested, we are sending our weakest available combatant. He specializes in keeping people alive, not the opposite. Good luck. End quote. Vex 9 felt his stomach acids churn. 3 months ago, when the Ravager Fleet had appeared at the edge of their system like a plague of mechanical locusts, the Galactic Defense Council had made a desperate decision. Send requests to every known warrior species. Ask for their weakest fighters. The logic was sound, if humiliating. If even the weakest warriors from legendary species could help, maybe they stood a chance. The Chronari had sent a juvenile who could bench press a battle cruiser. The Thexians had sent someone they called barely competent, who then proceeded to single-handedly hold off a Ravager assault for 6 hours. The Zeltrons had sent their most pathetic excuse for a warrior, who turned out to be a master of 17 different combat disciplines, but humans? Humans were the stuff of legends. Stories whispered in dark corners of space stations about bipedal monsters who fought with the fury of dying stars. Tales of creatures so violent they had to be kept on a planet quarantined from civilized society. Rumors of beings who considered pain a recreational activity, and they had sent their weakest. Permission to dock granted, Vex 9 finally managed. Alert all stations. The human is coming aboard. The docking bay fell silent as the small Earth vessel touched down with barely a whisper. Not the thunderous landing of a warrior's craft, but the gentle settling of something designed for mercy missions. The airlock hissed open, and Vex 9 held his breath. Out stepped a human, who was average. Disappointingly, terrifyingly average. About 6 feet tall, which was standard for his species according to the files. Brown hair that looked like it hadn't seen a combat barber in weeks. Friendly brown eyes that seemed more interested in scanning for injured personnel than identifying threats. And most confusing of all, he wore no armor. Just a simple green uniform with a red symbol on his arm. A cross. The ancient human symbol for medical aid. Hi there. The human raised one hand in what their cultural database identified as a friendly greeting. I'm Marcus Webb, Field Medic, Earth Humanitarian Corps. Sorry for the delay, we had to stop and help some refugees 3 systems back. Hope I'm not too late for whatever's going on here? The silence stretched until it became physically uncomfortable. You're... Vex 9 struggled with the translator. You're a medic? That's right. 23 years of service, 207 confirmed saves in combat zones. Well, 208 if you count that Zeltronian ambassador who choked on those weird purple berries last week, but technically that wasn't a combat situation, so... Marcus shrugged cheerfully. But we asked for your weakest warrior. Right, and they sent me. Marcus seemed genuinely confused by their confusion. I mean, I'm terrible at the whole fighting thing. Can barely hit the broadside of a space station with a plasma rifle. But keeping people breathing? That's my specialty. Lieutenant Cora's voice squeaked through the translator. Sir, the Ravager Fleet will be in weapons range in 18 hours. Marcus's expression shifted instantly. The friendly confusion vanished, replaced by something that made Vex 9's survival instincts scream warnings. Ravagers? Those are the mechanical pirates who harvest living beings for spare parts, right? You know of them? Oh sure, we've tangled with their type before. Marcus's voice carried an edge now, like a surgical instrument being sharpened. They showed up in the Tau Ceti system about 5 years ago. Made a real mess of things. What happened? Marcus smiled, and Vex 9 suddenly understood why humans were quarantined. That smile held something that definitely wasn't medical in nature. We explained to them the concept of medical ethics. Specifically, the part about first, do no harm and how violating that principle tends to make medical professionals very, very upset. And? Well, let's just say the Tau Ceti system is now a designated humanitarian zone under Earth protection. The Ravagers decided they had urgent business elsewhere. Commander Vex 9 felt a spark of something that might have been hope. So you can fight them? Oh, I can't fight worth a damn, Marcus laughed, and the sound somehow managed to be both warm and terrifying. But here's the thing about medics, especially human medics. We take our oaths very seriously. And right now, everyone on this station qualifies as my patient. The human began walking toward the exit, examining the station's defensive positions with the calculating eye of someone who had spent decades keeping people alive in impossible circumstances. So, Commander Vex 9, right? Tell me about your defensive capabilities. How many wounded can we expect? What's your current medical staff situation? And most importantly, Marcus turned back, and that unsettling smile returned. Exactly how many Ravager ships are we dealing with? 17 dreadnoughts, 43 destroyers, and approximately 200 fighters. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Okay, that's manageable. I've dealt with worse odds. You got a decent medical bay on this station? Manageable? Cora's voice cracked entirely. You call a fleet of 260 ships manageable? Lieutenant, Marcus's tone became professorial. In the Battle of Kepler Station, I kept a field hospital running while 1,200 Harbinger warmechs tried to turn the place into scrap metal. In the Siege of New Geneva, I performed emergency surgery on a ship's captain while his vessel was actively breaking apart around us. And during the infamous Tuesday incident on Mars. Marcus paused. Well, we don't talk about Tuesday. He continued walking, but his voice drifted back with casual confidence. The thing about being a medic in a war zone is that you learn to see combat from a different angle. Most people focus on killing the enemy. I focus on keeping my people alive. And you know what's interesting? Sometimes those two goals require exactly the same skill set. Vex 9 followed the human, feeling something shift in the station's atmosphere. Crew members were beginning to gather, drawn by some inexplicable magnetism. Word was spreading. The human had arrived. Marcus, Vex 9 ventured, what exactly do you plan to do against a Ravager fleet? The human stopped at a viewport, staring out at the stars where death approached on solar winds. His reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a face that had seen too much suffering and had made peace with doing whatever was necessary to stop it. Commander, in 23 years of keeping people alive in impossible situations, I've learned something important. The Hippocratic Oath says first, do no harm. But it also says to preserve life at all costs. Sometimes those two principles come into direct conflict. Marcus turned from the viewport, and for just a moment, Vex 9 glimpsed something that made him understand why Earth was quarantined from the rest of civilized space. When that happens, Marcus continued with that terrible gentle smile, medical professionals have to make very difficult decisions about triage. About who gets to live, and who. He shrugged. Well, let's just say the Ravagers are about to receive a comprehensive education in battlefield medicine. The station's proximity alarms began to sound. 18 hours had somehow become 6. Marcus Webb, Earth's weakest warrior, cracked his knuckles and headed for the medical bay. Time to make some house calls. The medical bay transformed under Marcus's hands like a patient receiving emergency surgery. Within 2 hours, the gentle human medic had reorganized the entire facility with the efficiency of someone who had done this dance too many times before. Cora, I need every spare power cell redirected to the medical equipment. Yes, even the ones from life support. Trust me on this. Marcus worked while he talked, his hands never stopping their precise movements. Vex 9, how many crew members do we have who can handle basic field medicine? 17, but they're not trained for combat conditions. Perfect. Combat conditions are where medical training really shines. Marcus's voice carried that same unsettling cheerfulness. Get them down here. I'm about to give them a crash course in what we humans call battlefield triage. The first wave of Ravager scouts appeared on the sensors like a cancer spreading across the display screen. 12 ships, sleek and predatory, moving in formation toward the station. Marcus, Vex 9's voice trembled through the calm system. They're launching boarding pods. How many? 6 pods, approximately 40 Ravagers total. Marcus paused in his equipment preparation, and that terrible smile returned. Only 40? That's adorable. They're being polite. Lieutenant Cora burst into the medical bay, her tentacles writhing with panic. The first pod just breached Section 7. They're cutting through the bulkheads. Good, good. Right on schedule. Marcus pulled on a pair of surgical gloves with the ceremonial precision of a warrior donning battle armor. Cora, I need you to establish a medical triage station in Section 9. Anyone who can still walk gets patched up and sent back to their posts. Anyone who can't. Marcus's expression hardened, gets priority treatment. But Section 9 is right in the path of the Ravager advance. Exactly. The sound of plasma cutters echoed through the station's corridors, followed by the distinctive mechanical whir of Ravager combat units. These weren't living beings, Vex 9 remembered with a chill. They were harvested organic components grafted onto mechanical frames. Beings who had once been people, transformed into something that existed only to create more of themselves. First casualties coming in, someone shouted. Marcus moved like liquid lightning. His hands flew over the wounded with surgical precision, but there was something else in his movements now. Something predatory. This one's stable, get him to recovery. This one needs immediate surgery, prep table 2. And this one. Marcus paused over a crew member whose arm had been completely severed by a Ravager plasma blade. This one is going to help us send a message. Marcus, his arm, will be fine. I've reattached limbs in worse conditions. The human medic began working, and Vex 9 watched in fascination as those gentle hands performed what could only be described as miraculous surgery. But first, we're going to make sure our uninvited guests understand the house rules. The station shuddered as more boarding pods made contact. The sounds of combat grew closer. Sir. A communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. The Ravagers are demanding we surrender all organic life forms for processing. They're offering to make it quick. Marcus didn't look up from his surgery. Tell them we have a counteroffer. All Ravager units are to surrender immediately for medical evaluation and treatment. Silence filled the medical bay. Treatment? Cora's voice was barely a whisper. Oh yes. You see, Ravagers suffer from a very serious medical condition. They're experiencing what we in the medical field call catastrophic existence failure. It's terminal, but highly treatable. Marcus finished the last suture with artistic precision. The treatment involves rapid application of high-energy medicine, usually administered at the speed of light. The first group of Ravagers reached the medical bay entrance. 6 mechanical horrors that had once been living beings, their organic components twisted into grotesque fusion with combat hardware. Their sensors swept the room, cataloging potential harvests. Medical personnel identified, one of them spoke through vocal cords that had been replaced with mechanical synthesizers. Surrender for processing. Resistance is futile. Marcus looked up from his patient, and Vex 9 saw something in the human's eyes that made his species' ancient fears of Earth suddenly make perfect sense. Gentlemen, Marcus's voice was perfectly calm, perfectly professional, you're in violation of medical ethics. This is a designated treatment area, and I'm afraid you qualify as patients. We do not require treatment. Oh, but you do. Marcus stood slowly, reaching for something that had been obscured by his medical equipment. You're suffering from acute mechanical parasitism. The organic components of your bodies have been compromised by foreign technological integration. Left untreated, this condition results in complete loss of biological function. What Marcus pulled from behind his equipment wasn't a medical scanner. It was sleek, compact, and hummed with the distinctive whine of human military technology. Fortunately, Marcus continued, his voice taking on the bedside manner of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis, I have the perfect cure. The weapon in his hands didn't look like anything Vex 9 had seen before. It was white, marked with red crosses, and seemed to pulse with its own internal energy. This is a Mark 7 medical intervention device. Specifically designed for treating cases of involuntary mechanical integration. The treatment is administered through focused electromagnetic therapy, delivered at approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. That's a weapon, the lead Ravager stated with mechanical certainty. It's medicine, Marcus corrected gently. Very aggressive medicine. The first shot turned the lead Ravager into component atoms. The energy beam was perfectly white, clean, surgical in its precision. Where the mechanical horror had stood, only empty air remained. Patient successfully treated, Marcus announced to the room. Mechanical parasitism completely eliminated. Organic components returned to base molecular state. No possibility of reinfection. The remaining Ravagers opened fire. Marcus moved like he had been born in a war zone, which, Vex 9 realized with growing understanding, he probably had been. The human medic flowed between the plasma bolts with fluid grace, never stopping his commentary. Patient 2, presenting with advanced parasitic integration. Another perfectly aimed shot, another Ravager reduced to its component elements. Treatment successful. Patient 3, severe case of aggressive mechanical syndrome. The medical intervention device hummed again. Prognosis, excellent. Within 30 seconds, the medical bay was quiet again. Marcus holstered his weapon and immediately returned to checking on his surgical patient. Vitals are stable, reattachment is holding perfectly. He'll be back to full duty within a week. Marcus, Vex 9 managed, what was that weapon? Medical equipment. Standard issue for Earth humanitarian core field medics. Marcus's tone was matter-of-fact, professional. When you take an oath to preserve life, You sometimes have to be very aggressive about eliminating threats to your patient's health. The station's communication system crackled to life. All units, this is Ravager Fleet Command. We are detecting weapons fire inconsistent with known defensive capabilities. Explain. Marcus walked over to the communication console with that same gentle smile. Ravager Fleet Command, this is Chief Medical Officer Webb. I'm currently conducting mandatory health screenings for all organic life forms in this system. Your crew members are showing signs of severe technological contamination and require immediate treatment. You destroyed our boarding team. I successfully treated 6 cases of acute mechanical parasitism. The treatment was completely successful. All patients have been returned to their natural molecular state, free from technological contamination. A long pause from the Ravager fleet. What are your terms? Marcus's smile widened, and Vex 9 finally understood why humans were considered the most terrifying species in known space. Present all infected personnel for treatment. The procedure is quick, painless, and has a 100% success rate. I guarantee complete elimination of mechanical contamination. And if we refuse treatment? Marcus looked out the viewport at the Ravager fleet hanging in space like a mechanical plague. Well, that would be a violation of medical ethics. I'd be forced to make house calls. The human medic turned back to his patients, humming softly while he worked. After all, he said to no one in particular, I did take an oath to preserve life. Sometimes that requires very aggressive preventive medicine. In the depths of space, the Ravager fleet began a strategic withdrawal. Marcus Webb, Earth's weakest warrior, returned to his surgery with the satisfied expression of a doctor who had just successfully completed a very difficult procedure.